Hello, MistaBusta. This is my... I'm obviously not used to making video responses for YouTube. It's really interesting talking into a camera and trying to convince myself that I'm talking to a real person. But I have talked to you online before, and I have actually really heard your voice, and I know you exist, so I watched your tape about consciousness, and I have birds in the next room. That's the screeching you just heard. Your theory was that the fact that we even have consciousness refutes determinism. I hadn't really thought about that before. That's a really interesting concept. Let me see if I can summarize what you had to say in your video. I liked that you had clips of experts talking as well. You said that the theory of causality, that one of the underpinnings of determinism is the theory that everything that happens is caused to happen. Everything that happens has a preset cause. Nothing and no one can do anything to change those causes. That is a theory of determinism. I took a philosophy course in the spring semester this year, and that's exactly what we studied. What's interesting, though, is none of the determinist philosophers argued against the idea of consciousness. They all took it as a given that we have consciousness. In fact, one of them compared the state of humans with their lives being completely determined, yet still being aware of that, to Sisyphus. Sisyphus, if you don't know, was a Greek myth, and in the underworld, Sisyphus had defied the gods, so his punishment was to forever try to roll a huge stone up a hill, and every time he got it almost to the top, it would fall and roll all the way back down to the bottom. And then he'd have to do the whole thing over again and over again and over again for eternity. He couldn't change anything. He was doomed to keep struggling in this meaningless existence. So that was the determinist model for human life. And that philosopher, I think his name was Camus. I should really look that up. First, when I thought of your statement, I thought that doesn't quite sit right with me. I mean, even the most atheistic philosophers and scientists all acknowledge that we have consciousness. But then when I thought about it more and more, I thought, well, you can't prove consciousness or life in a laboratory. You can't prove it in a laboratory. And determinism, I would argue, depends partly on basing our reality only on what we can prove definitely in a laboratory. What I want to say is that science has no real proof or definition of what life really is. We know it exists, everyone knows it exists, and everyone can tell when something is alive or when it's not alive, or when it goes from being alive to not alive. But we don't really know what exactly it is that makes, what is the essence of life, what is the essence of being alive, what is it in that plant that makes it grow, as opposed to that other one that's withered and doesn't grow anymore. You know, what exactly is it that changes in a person who was alive a minute ago and then just went away? You could say it's the destruction of the physical body, but what is it that leaves that body? The body's still there. A scientist or a philosopher might say that's a very amateur argument, but I will say that I agree with you. I agree with your theory about consciousness being a chink in the armor of determinism, because it isn't like the rest of the cosmos where there isn't really any justice or good or evil to the explosions on a planet where there's no life. It just happens. Yet when there's a being that can decide what to do, and when there are other beings that can consciously be affected by decisions, then you begin to have good and evil and right and wrong. So thanks for pointing me to your video, and I look forward to talking with you again.